And good afternoon. Thank you very much for fourth and last panel of our regional forum on pensions for 2020. The last roundtable is dedicated to speak about the challenges in the management and administration of the pensions systems. We just finished our roundtable before for international organizations. We had the presence of people from Japan, Mexico, AEs and OEs, where they all presented the different positions. And today, in this last roundtable, as I told you, we shall have the presence of the colleagues of the Caja, of the IMSS, National Administration for Administration Protection of Argentina, the presence of colleagues from the Ecuadorian Social Security Institute and the Mexican Institute of Mexico. The objective, as I said, is to speak about the challenges of administration of the pension schemes. These pension schemes have actually shared some basic characteristics, such as the result of the promotion and technical assistance fostered by the International Organization of the WTO. A long time, every country has gone its own way and has developed their own guidelines and the different ways in which they have all looked after to have, so they can have a system to have a correct coverage with services that will not risk the viability of installations and that they don't turn into a very expensive system of services that might lead to tax resources to other areas. So this panel will provide the opportunity, or its end is to precisely that one shares as a top of dialogue some of the experiences that I consider as the most relevant for the continent, to get to know the attention of this problem area, its regulations, its supervision, its administration, and the management of the pension schemes. And same as the challenges that we are facing, not only just even facing what is current in this century, with the added constant burden as regards health, economy, guided by a world pandemic. So basically, the challenge here is to solve three questions. The first question is, what are the challenges of the different institutions as regards coverage and the sufficiency of money availability? What are the challenges of the pension schemes? And lastly, get to know what measures are being taken by the institutions to go forward onto the universal coverage. As I said, we should have different institutions, members of the Inter-American Social Security Association. I'd like to pass the mic on to the Executive Subdirector of the ANSES Rendering Services Department, Mrs. Andrina Moretti. Marina Moretti, she's a lawyer in communications on behalf of Buenos Aires University. She was a provincial senator and worked in the Minister of the Cultural area. She is a counselor for the Frente de Todos in San Andrés de Giles. She is, as I said, Executive Subdirector of Services for ANTES Argentina. Go ahead. Good afternoon, or good afternoon. Thank you very much. A pleasure to share this moment with brother or sisters countries on Social Security. For what you just said, I will make reference to what seems to be correct for my presentation, to say that the social systems in Latin America and in America in general started and are closely linked to a very important WTO help. The social security system was linked to the tax systems. A different world, but linked to other activities. And I believe that I will go ahead something that I want to present again at the end of my presentation, the management of our model. I will coincide with sister countries because we're going further away from social security technically treated to and passing out to work transients, a change of paradigm, and the social security is not only the retirement scheme, but we're speaking about protection, and as a community, it's something to protect ourselves versus the different events and contingencies of life. Obviously, we're talking about another paradigm, and I would add to it, I would say that from my experience that I had, I would add that for every model of state, there should be a social security model understood as a group of policies that try to protect the community versus the different events. But anyway, what you said about what is contributive and distributive, I think the reality that we have to make another differentiation, which is searching for equality, searching universality, searching differentiation. And in Argentina, we can see it very clearly when that discussion is taken over by the search for universality. We want to be an intelligent example of a country in the 10 years that characterized the governments of the Kirchner's presidency, with what we can quickly establish myths in social security, stunting in 2005 with what was then that would seem that our country was receiving more than 3 million people of more than 60 or 65 years old. I want to remember that this happens 4 years after the Liberal and Social Institutional Party of Argentina, where the coverage rate as regards provision was 65%. In other words, 35% of men and women or more than 60 or 65 years old did not have any coverage or any income, and 65% that did have it had it frozen, 150 pesos. People might understand what I mean by this currency. There was a decade that had been frozen. The income of those retired persons within the minimum in 2006, we had 40 increases that are consecutive by decree, and we'll speak about this later. And this imposed a mobility. But in the middle of this, the tension is solved by universality and equality, because we incorporated over 6 million people for the pension schemes. So we have one situation that prevails still and another one that finished, if I remember well, in the year 2014. That attention has had a strong component of gender, because 74% of those 6.3 million of benefits were for women. In Argentina, like in many other countries of our region, access to social benefit is related to men. When a family was chosen who was going to pay to the contributive system, we would decide by the man. And that is why we would have the different activities. This regulation, before we spoke about the terms that we're speaking of today, e- equality in gender, that's a great policy because massively we had women in being access to the social security system. And for by 2008, as a country, we also made a decision in a sense that opened the system of coverage and social security, which was the AJP's profitability. Just shortly before 2007, we managed that every citizen could opt for what regime they wanted, or the capitalization or the distribution system that had been dis disassembled, but that had actually been the basis of the coverage and the under the understanding that the current generations we look after the incomes of the generations that are growing older, a system based on a self-pact among generations. That was disassembled with the capitalization system. And in 2007, we recovered that. And by 2008, we made a decision on going back and creating and have the system well integrated for the pensions, SIBA. This meant that the portfolio of investments of AJP would integrate sustainability, and that is why precisely we have different types of retirements of the Argentine people. I was saying that these pensions, because of universality and differentiation, in Argentina, they incorporated different ones based on gender and based on 49 social security systems, abiding by contingencies, and in another year, because of a degree, we create in Argentina the universal institution, which is just an institution for social security, which is the same, which covers children, boys and girls of all our nation, granting a type of income quite independent whether the mother and the father are part of the system of registered work or informality. Argentina has got this type of family assignments. So what they didn't have by 2009 for children, they could have it, even if the father was in the informal market. Another area is solved regarding equality. I must add that in the same stage as I told today, the creation of a provisional guideline, we tried to establish increases per year because of through the traditional system, and based on the raising of salaries and on taxes. So when we start the new formula applied to the provisional system, further on that mobility formula is applied to the whole system, and it includes the family assignments. And later, we incorporated the universal assignment through pregnancy. And now in Argentina, we have about monthly. I don't want to give you the incorrect numbers, but I would say that 100,000 women who collect this type of payment, and people on the wages who have got their pregnancy covered, a benefit that is special as well. If we characterize this period, the attention is solved through universality and through equality and through an improvement of the coverage, through the situation of elderly people and children, and it leaves us as a country in 93% of provisional status and universality as regards boys and girls. Then later, this stage is accompanied by Provecea, which is for children under secondary school, etc. Thanks to this, we were able to make investments, and we share that with the Ministry of Economy for the development of the first housing. And we launched this. We launched a credit card of the retired people in Argentina. And in the last few years, in the last 4 years, the same attention that I'm telling you is solved, I believe, for the differentiation. And if we speak also about the historical repair in 2016, the ROEs looked to agree on the facts and what might have had a provincial aspect. At that moment, we thought that, according to history in Argentina, we would end up with the money coming from what we call the cleaning of capitals. But I would say that with these additional accounts, the financing of this historical stage was left in financing.
So aside from this historical repair, this compensation belonging to the last stage after moratoriums, which I told you it was just one permanent, but this moratorium allowed to prescribe certain years or just prepay contributions. In that in 2014 what the priors did was creating a new benefit, which is a universal benefit for the elderly known as PUAM, which is a benefit of much lesser quality. We're basically talking about 80% of the minimum retirement. But it's not also that, but we're also talking about that this does not generate any type of pension rights. So this has lower quality as a benefit, and right now we have 175,000 beneficiaries under this benefit. So we also have this new Provisional Mobility Act replacing the 2008 mobility formula. And as I told you, this was a formula tied to giving back fiscal resources and salaries. And this act kind of unhinges the evolution of the resources. And this brought about a lot of paperwork, legal paperwork. Because, I mean, real salaries for workers were suspended for 3 months. So between December 2017 and 2019, where we were able to measure, it lost around 14.5%. And In terms of middle grounds, it lost about 12.6% that same period. Now, for the last 4 years, we lost in coverage. And we have people over 60 years waiting for PUAN, this benefit you're entitled to after you turn 65. So what happened is that differentiations towards the inside of the traditional pension system became deeper. So, well, that helps a little bit discussion between universality and differentiation. Now, the systematic loss of contributions linked to the high rate of unemployment. What happened in Argentina those past 4 years, and also the loss of income, because at that point, government 0.15% of what we received automatically, all that made our organization to lose autonomy when it comes to financing. And what I told you today, the application of historical repairs also left us in a difficult situation. So, I mean, things got worse with the pandemic, which is what we're currently undergoing with all sorts of difficulties, as you all know, because this is a phenomenon that's touching everybody. The pandemic, nevertheless, gave us a little bit of opportunity as it pertains to the challenges we had. It puts us again in this discussion, and after this discussion, we came up with a decision from President Alberto Ferrande, this being creating this emergency family fund that, for the case of our country, will reach almost 9 million people who right now are collecting this benefit that quote-unquote covers that which out of the measures that we've taken to be able to take care of our health, well, it has been detrimental. So this emergency family fund leaves us again in conditions of rethinking this paradigm related to social security as it pertains to our rights. Our current task has to do with that. It has to do with repairing. It has to do with rebuilding. It also has to do with how we're going to improve this coverage system for elderly people and beyond. We have 7.1 retirees and pension holders, almost 8.5 million beneficiaries. And our challenge has to do with how to get a coverage rate that make us proud right now. Well, we're around 95%, and how to incorporate those not not benefited by this concept of universality. We're also working on a new mobility formula that might render again, or that's tied again to reality and not completely unhinged from our possibilities, but something that will warranty a leveled ground. Again, the same attention between universality, equality, and differentiation. And like I mentioned, this pandemic and having to have this emergency family fund. You know, as with other policies in Argentina, we have another benefit, that's support for work and production. I also mentioned this, but well, the state pays half the wage of the of the workers in companies whose activities have been affected by the pandemics, thus losing income. So our challenge is how to start working with those members of the populations, which, like I said at the beginning, because of the contingencies, because of these recent events, the committee, we decided to protect. So the social security framework under which we thought this is, well, just protecting our people through public policies. That will ultimately build a level ground and opportunities for this generation and for the coming generations. So thank you very much for listening to my presentation. There'll probably be some questions, and if there are no questions, well, I will just listen to the next panel member. Thank you very much, Marina Moretti.
Thank you for the representative of Argentina so much. And we gladly listen to your participation, and definitely we shall listen to the rest of the intervention participation to go to that. Fortunately, we have received specific questions for you, lady, but in addition to the other speakers, we shall leave it to the rest of the presentations. And no doubt, of course, very important, the proposal of the different colleagues from Argentina along the fact that you have called this historic repair as an opportunity not only of profiting from the opportunities that this crisis is giving us, but going back onto what you had detected before, and such as the policy of the access of the family within this aspect of the pandemic. And next, we'll pass the mic to the colleagues of the Caja Costarricense of Social Security this afternoon to speak about the pension schemes in Costa Rica. We've got the manager of pensions, Jaime Barranque Espinosa, an economist for the University of Costa Rica. Have we got him connected? Mr. Jaime, we need you to turn on your camera as well, and the rest of the participants. Thank you very much. Yes, perfect. Right, I will continue with the CV of Barrantes. He's an economist from the Costa Rica University and with the management of social security systems from the Ibero-American Society and the University of Alcalá in Spain. He has also worked as head of the administration of risks, manager of pension schemes, and as we said, he's manager of the pension schemes at the Caja Costarricense. With not further ado, we welcome Mr. Jaime Barrantes. We've got a certain problem, I think, with the way in which your screen is being seen. Could you please talk to us to see if we can check on the audio, please? Could you please speak to us, Mr. Barrantes? Thanks for the space. I'm trying to upload a presentation, but I don't know if, can you see it or are there problems? Give us a few seconds, right? We're trying to present the, well, upload the presentation. You can put it up now. Yes, thank you. Right, Chair? Yes, can you see it now? Yes, we've got it on screen. Whenever you wish, you can start now. Right. Thanks very much for the opportunity of presenting what we as country are working on as regards the challenges in the management of our pension schemes. And we know that we've got the challenges, but we're not alone. All the Latin American countries are facing the same thing, and African and the whole world is facing a series of challenges and special circumstances that we see are changing, but that are imposing a series of guidelines or standards or things that we need to continue to check and cover, especially all the topics on risks as well, and for pensions, which is what I wish to share with you today. And this is the story of the country as regards the social security topics. It's been running for several years. It goes back to 1940, 1941, the Costarricense Caja, which administers everything which is the attention on health and everything that's related to the coverage of investments. And with this, then, we've got a whole history where the pension system starts with a limited coverage, especially for public servants and for some professionals in the private sector. And then this is increasing, this coverage is increasing and enlarged. And then we've got other type of workers incorporated, construction workers, home workers, and agricultural workers. And in that way, that story has allowed us to have Social Security with a coverage that is very important. Practically 63% of the population that is economically active. Here we see the expectancy of life. We see how in all the countries, including our country, of course, in the last 70 years has had an increase, which has been important. We see Costa Rica there with an expectancy of life, one of the greatest ones in this area. And under such circumstances, we've got here the different ages for retirement for Latin American countries, where we see that even so, here now in many of our countries, the retirement age just are in ranges going from 60, 65, 70. And in an environment where we have been observing this important increase in the expectancy of life. And within such a frame, extra to this increase in the expectancy of life, we have checking all the different challenges that our economies are having right now. Say, for instance, the increase of the actual costs of the people and families. Families are having less children, and the ones that are active, they finance the ones that are being withdrawn, and then this carries an impact on the costs or expenses on the number of children per family, and also a long time when this pension will have to be paid, and the increase in the expenditure of life. And of course, there are other topics where the economy we can see, say, for instance, the principle of robots, because people are being substituted by robots, right, by automatic systems, and there's other things. So, which could be the aging, for instance. To face this situation, then, we have had in Costa Rica a system which comes from several financing areas. One of them would be the non-contributed system, and along this line, we've made an effort to enlarge the coverage, but it doesn't cover yet the totality of the population, but practically the elderly people, 65 years old on, and that are in a poverty situation. And for that, we've got the Social Security, the Caja, where it's a base system, and we give them a basic pension, those people that are affiliated to it. And that goes with a complementary system, which is individual for every person.
Where each person, based on their savings throughout times, have a benefit. And, well, this voluntary pillar to complement this pension. So, in this sense, IBM has had some recent reforms, especially when it comes to financial sustainability, to have the opportunity to adequate our system to the changes that we have seen throughout time. And in Costa Rica, in this sense, we have been working the social participation work line. So we have had two dialogue tables, one back in 2005 and one in 2017, where workers, employers, the government, and other stakeholders like SUPEN, which is an oversight organization, INAMU Women's Institution, well, they've sat at a table to propose strengthening the IPM and sufficiency in terms of, of benefits and pensions. So in Costa Rica, we've tried to reach a consensus that will allow for the strengthening of the national pension system, where the IBM is not the only one, but it's coexisting with other regimes and well, complementary pension fund management. So after these work tables, we've had a series of consensus as it pertains to strengthening the actuarial arena. So we've had adjustments in contributions. It always was 7.5%, and one of the agreements was increasing this to 10.5%. But in 0.5 increases yearly. And we just agreed to accelerate this from 5 to 3 years. And other important elements like the increase in the number of contributions and do this type of echelon work in the basic rate in the first years and well, increasing the number of years for one to attain these benefits. We have other important measures as increasing the contribution of the state in IBM's minimum pension. And like I said, together with the efforts that we're doing in the non-contribution regimes, the country has the need and discussion, as said by other panel members before me, the need of moving towards this universality. It's imperative, universality of a minimum pension. That will ensure all the elderly people has access to a certain degree of pension. And we've also discussed other types of projects that have a little bit more to do with, well, not an alternative method of having incomes through some projects of law that will reinforce social contributions. It's not only social contributions as one way to finance the subject of pensions, but that it could be complemented by the individual efforts of people, and also with no traditional source of income that could come from some other projects or initiatives that we're discussing in the country. So in this sense, these two dialogue round tables have helped to face all these challenges. When it comes to actual liquidity, coverage, and pretty much improving sufficiency. So, by applying these measures and well, by having more maturity in the second pillar, we can foresee that everything pertaining to improving sustainability of the system throughout time. And if these adjustments, well, should be made by means of consensus. So we see how IVM and well, pretty much a whole pension system can tackle this issue of hacking and provisional activities. So here we can see some experiences that we've had with the Ministry of Public Education, where we've visited schools and colleges to talk about pensions and some other elements that through virtual platforms that have been potentialized because of the pandemic, both to to do all the paperwork for pensions, and also to provide information to the elderly, especially now that we need to widespread information about how to take care of them physically, health, promoting family participation. In the sense, and in these difficult moments because of the pandemics, we'll be able to strengthen our population. And also regarding coverage, we've made efforts that we're trying to make flexible the rather rigid models that we had. Everything's pointing to formal work, working 8, 9 hours a day, and well, there's something that's changing to allow for other modes for people to contribute based on partial work days, and also having benefits for even migrants that we have be able to contribute to the pension, increasing the participation women in the labor market, and other things that the institution has been trying to put together to improve the contribution method. At the same time, helping, very important point was support of government with other initiatives to increase coverage in domestic service, which is also an important portion that we've been working on. Something else right now, we have stated a series of additional measures to strengthen actuarial sustainability, and these have to do with gradually eliminating anticipated contributions or pensions because of the increase in life expectancy and well having a retirement age of around 65 years. But again, with gradual adjustments or just trying to define different ways for people to completely retire, and also trying to tie this contribution efforts with the perceived and received efforts. And we have a lot of proposals. These proposals are being discussed right now with among the different stakeholders. The board of directors of our institution has received these projects, and tying them up with other projects where we're discussing them, trying to make their work. All this in the framework of these parametric adjustments, which we've seen as a country. We've seen it's not only necessary making these adjustments that have to do with the parameters of the system. And the IVM, because of its contribution and nature, won't be able to solve every single topic that has to do with coverage, given the fact that you require from the worker, and that worker needs to have some sort of a quote unquote formal working life, and a salary that can derive into lifelong contributions. And some workers, because of their working activity that might be a little bit unstable, won't be able to have access to that model. And well, right now it's self-evident the need to complement these efforts with other types of incomes and alternatives to complement the IVM. So right now in our Congress, we're discussing these alternative sources of income. Some people have been talking about why not having some sort of a percentage of the VIT destined to this. So every people are purchasing product, well, the VIT could help strengthening pensions. Maybe we could have, collect more taxes on robotization or automation, probably incomes for innovation, high technology, some rates for data consumptions, and that this would strengthen the society as a whole, and obviously strengthening everything that has to do with sufficiency and coverage of benefits, without making, gross adjustments in the parameters of the system to provide the sectorial sustainability that we need so direly. So these elements, both historic and adjustments that we've had through time, have us, in a good contributions coverage in this IVM regime that has been increased in 2005, around 49%, close to 2020. We have over 63% of these salaried employees correspond to 67%, and non-salaried workers would represent 55.4%. So all in all, while we're doing adjustments, I don't think we'll arrive to 100% coverage. That would be difficult. But there's a long way to go. There's an important number of people without a pension, without access to a pension. And right now, I mean, we've seen that in the last decade, the percentage of elderly people has improved, older people with pension has improved. We see this percentage of what we call la caja covers well, close to 45% of the population. So right now, people without a contribution regime can find other alternatives. But again, there's still an important group of population which might have been reduced. But right now, they're not receiving anything. Hence, the need of us as a country to be able to integrate these efforts and trying to come up with a more robust multi-pillar system. So that we can have different sources of financing, covers different sectors of the population. So we have the non-contributional regime, and the fact that we should aim to the universalization of this system, something that warranties minimum pension, and based on that, all the contribution efforts done by workers could be managed by a distribution system that Costa Rica already has. And again, increasing efforts to increase that system's coverage and warranting its financial sustainability, probably complemented by a third pillar, which in this case, in the case of Costa Rica, well, it's mandatory. And, well, that this complements what the person would receive, this universal pension under this contributional system, plus the workers' individual efforts. So based on these sources of financing, is it we're trying to improve everything that has to do with the coverage of the system, its economic sustainability, and the amount of sufficiency that the country has and that the country needs. And, well, you know, as every other countries, we're dealing with the pandemics. We've faced a reduction of income, of course, and we've had to even sustain or some instances increase expenses. That's why we have this reserve or investments, and the interests have allowed us to finance all this. And as a country, we've given different benefits. We have this program called Bono Proteger, or protection benefit for all those people who have lost their livelihood and don't have a work, something to generate income from. So, and also we're trying to provide flexibility, you know, people paying to the contributions to the government to be able to face this situation as well. So we're in the midst of this revolution of different subjects, and well, that will be the end of my presentation. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, please make sure to let me know. Thank you very much, Mr. Barrantes Espinosa from Caja Costarricense de Seguridad Social, for your participation. your talk, making reference that this provisional scheme of Costa Rica takes into consideration these new work modalities. This whole development is very interesting, and also having this provisional system or education, this provisional system, as spearheading this transformation and understanding of what social security is through different strategies of widespread knowledge and awareness to the population. So at the end of all of all the presentations, we will have a Q&A. Now I'll pass the floor to the Director of the Pension System of the Ecuadorian System of Social Security, Mr. Jose Martinez Dobransky. He is an economist, graduated from the Pontificia Universidad Católica de Ecuador, and he has a master's on social and Latin American studies by the Alberto Hurtado University Santiago de Chile. He's had worked in the social security system of Ecuador as general director. He also has a prominent career as a scholar and as a professional, and he's an expert in designing of public policy and programs related to economy, security, and protection of social system and the work system, among others. And currently, he serves as the director of the pension system for the Sistema Ecuatoriano de Seguro Social. Mr. Dobansky, the floor is yours.
Hello, good day, and thanks for everything. Thanks for just your lovely introduction, and of course for us as an Institute of Social Security, it's a pleasure to participate here, much more so because it's an event of OIs and experts who are concerned analyzing this so sensitive topic for our countries. And I would say that as such Ecuadorian Social Security, we share lots of the challenges we've listened to, and we shall concentrate a little bit on the Ecuadorian case and tell you first that for the case of Social Security of Ecuador, our institutionality is based on, well, the Social Security has got 3 institutions that represent it, and it's an obligation for all the workers and employers, and there is a system that is parallel, which is the service for the armed forces, and the same for the police. And of course, the 3 administer or manage the Social Security, and with each one with its challenges and sustainability problems, which are important, especially what are related to the financing and what is related to the pension schemes, which I'll speak ES, which is part of those 3 institutions, the one we're talking about now, because of the contribution of all the workers, or that all the workers should make. They are assured for health, risk of unemployment, and the peasant working scheme, which is a very specific thing for Ecuador. We depend a lot on the working case, on whether the job is formal or not, and in as much as the pandemic that we are suffering has hit a lot the topic of unemployment. For the case of Ecuador, the contribution is an obligation. All workers must pay or contribute. However, we've got a first challenge of coverage, because currently only 40 or 35% of the workers do it, regardless of the fact that there are sanctions of penal or penalization purposes for those who don't register the workers for Social Security. This contribution 2060, and as reference, the workers contribute with 50% and the workers the other 50%. in round figures. Regarding the systems of pensions, up to 2014, out of those 60% that I told you about, 986 was destined for pensions. In 2015, there was internal reform because we needed to strengthen and finance more the health insurance. So we increased these in the pension schemes. It has been 596, and it's gone up and gone up, gone up to 996, and of 2021 it's gone to 1056, which will be kept for long term. So overcoming a little bit more what we had in 2014. Of course, this reduction of the percentage that is destined or aimed at to this pension scheme to cover all the fringe benefits of the IBM represented reduction and complications in the sustainability. Just like in the rest of the pension schemes, we manage the pension because of elderly age, disabilities, and for the cases of different situations like becoming widows. And people who have got disability, they get an anticipated pension, who have got at least a 30% of disability, according to what the entity has considered. Briefly here, I want to show the financial situation, and you'll see that as regards income, in 2014, more or less, for the pension funds, they had $4,000 million, so that you can understand this is 4% of the GDP of the country, and this percentage of contributions was reduced, and it recovered as of 2019, and this year the trend is that it is recovering. However, you see that we've got tax problems, hence the reason we don't receive a good income for pensions, which is 40%. We've got a complex crisis system in Ecuador also, and that has avoided the fact that the Ministry of Finances should give us that amount for the pensions from the previous year. But what is important here is to see that the income for the management system have been reduced, and when they were, it looked as though when we could recover, the pandemic took place, and we have had taxing problems here. For instance, we have the expenses. What is important is to analyze as of 2015, 2014, 2015, all the way to 2019, the expenses have actually doubled. The challenge of how to generate more sources of income and not depend so much on that state contribution is in constant dilemma, except the fact in the way in which we handle the pensions, and that come from the excessive amounts that we had from the last year. But in the case of Ecuador, for instance, we created an investment bank and for welfare that administers these investments, and then there's a huge discussion as to how are they administering those resources, and the quality of those investments is to have sustainability on a long-term basis. This slide only ratifies what I'm telling you about, for instance, for the case of retired people, and we go from 231,000 to 403,008. Through aging in Ecuador, we have 1,200,000 persons older than 60 years old. Out of this, in the contribution system, we look after 400,000. They do get a pension from the contributive systems, and the non-contributive systems, they get a pension that is 375,000, which will be the people older than 65 years old that are under poverty or extreme poverty situations. So we've got a third that do not receive neither from the contributive system nor from the non-contributive system either. Many of these are waiting to get to be older so they can be included in the contributive pension scheme, because retirement is after 60 years old, and if I work 30 years, and if I'm 60, it's only 15. And if I've got 70 years, then what I'm required is 10 years of work. So there is a system that tries to comply with these both situations, to be able to retire yourself, and this has brought about greater pressure on Social Security. And as we saw in the previous slide, if the way this grows year after year, pensioners and the way they quote or list has remained stable. Right now, we've got about 3.5 million people that list or quote, and those that contribute, we've got about 3,100,000, because we also have this scheme that I spoke about the peasant pension scheme, where the contribution is much less, and it's a special system. And we've got domestic workers which are not paid for, and they've got a subsidy for that under different conditions. But whilst the number of pensioners goes up, then the number of contributors is kept the same. And under the pandemic, there's been a reduction of 10% of these persons that contribute. And of course, that reduces the amount of income that we've got to finance this fringe benefit, or this benefit, sorry. Just like the analysis that has been made for different countries of the region, we can see that what the distribution of this pension program is, and ratify what we said before, how from 2012 this has increased the number of pensioners up to 2020. And we see this, the triangle much wider as of 66 years old. And then this is in counterposition of those that quote, where we see an important growth, in this case of Ecuador, especially in the women that list or quote in the system. You can see in the center, in the blue lines, an increase much lesser than men. And in this pyramid, another thing that calls our attention and concerns us is the low or nil growth of people that list or quote that are younger. And this is, of course, related to a structural problem for people who are working in an informal manner. Here, a type of summary, some information as to how many quote or list in the Social Security of Ecuador. The salary is 656 for the quotation scheme. 2060 finances the whole of the social welfare, and for pensions of that listing or quoting, it gets to $63.03, whilst the average one is 583. So if we base ourselves on that analysis, then we would need, for instance, 9.2% to finance the pension of someone passive. So far, the relationship is more or less the same. For per pensioner, we got 5.7 that contribute. For the time being, this is covered by the 40% of that the state must contribute. But this is also a topic that is to be discussed regarding the substitution rates and the amounts of the pensions that are being paid and the way in which these are being calculated. So the challenges of this management. We have a law that came up in 2001 that was issued before the last constitution, and there was a new constitution approved in 2008. Much of these standards for Social Security before this constitution is updated. The main points of analysis have been exposed to society, and there's been a huge general discussion, national-wise, whether this scheme should continue to be public or could it be private or mixed from the point of view of the workers and retired people. And the position is that it should continue to be public, but administered in a more efficient manner. And for the employer sector and the private sector, we should prevent the participation of the private sector and not only be a state monopoly. Extracted complementary funds, for instance, all type of contribution should be of public nature. The other discussion is whether it should be distribution, as it usually is for the equatorial system, through solidarity, or should it be a capitalization that for the time being we are not considering. We also speak of the types of how we grant it. Could it be flexible? And if they could choose, if they contribute to IVM and health and not the other insurances. Right now, the affiliation is general and for everybody. And the pension scheme, we are discussing the age of retirement. As I told you in our case, the requirement, the lowest one is to be 60 years old and 360 contributions. That it represents 30 years of contributions, and I've got other options there. However, the new demographic studies show that the expectancy of life has increased importantly when these analyses were grown to determine the age of retirement, and this has been considered a discussion as well. There's lots of people who are not happy with it in the pretension of trying to increase the age of retirement. This is something that we have discussed as a country, and there's technical and intellectual evidence that say that this is a must decision. 996, what we've got for contribution, is it sufficient or not? Or how much more are we going to require to maintain the benefits that we've got currently in the calculation of the pensions, the replacement and the coefficients versus which we estimate the pensions. The more years you have contributed, the pension is higher, and the maximum that we can pay for the pensions. In the case of Ecuador, if I contributed 40 years or more, the maximum of my pension is 550% of the basic salary. In this case, $200,000, the maximum pension that a person can receive. And there are other topics related to health, financing of benefits, and something of a type of a corporation of how we should handle this in a legal manner, administrative manner as well. Of course, this leads to the fact that we must be sustainable in this IVM insurance, and we've got lots of income information. There are technical analysis and discussion regarding the impact of the demographic change, expectancy of life. It grew significantly, and little by little, we start to lose the demographic bonus, and that needs to be discussed more in the space of national conversation that we had with pensioners, with workers, with the working sector and the academia, where they wanted to reach a minimum agreements and try to solve those contradictory areas that came because of the pandemic. And it's something that as a country we have to take back, because indeed the changes have got to be taken in the short-term and long-term basis. That is why it's important to look for agreements with the workers and the employers. And usually, in some topics that are very sensible, we have different topics based on technical basis, but that do not complement each other too well. But the citizenship should be better informed and should have more feedback to have this idea of what the sustainability represents of the IBM on a long-term basis. And that is why this is very important, to make the citizens aware, the workers and the employers, regarding the importance of the quotations for social insurance and this culture of provision. Usually we are concerned about as to what's going to happen with our pensions and our incomes when I finish working, right? Or stop working, sorry, when I am more than 50 years old. Before that, there is not such an awareness. In the case of Ecuador, for instance, we have to relate this to social situation with the attention of health for the social security. This culture about prevention to have a worthy future is usually not quite in the minds of people. That's what I can tell you, and I thank you very much for your attention to this presentation. And I shall be here. Thank you. Thanks for the participation of the Ecuadorian Institute of Social Security, José Martínez Oberon. And quite quickly, before we say goodbye with the next participation, we want to thank the presence of people from the National Administration of Social Security of Argentina and CES, that because of their agenda, they cannot stay to the end of this roundtable. Hopefully, the answers and questions can be sent via mail in the chat, because there's many questions that were made to you. But then we say goodbye to you, and thanks for being with us and for participating in this forum. Right. Thanks very, very much to all of you. Sorry, I cannot listen anymore. Sorry, I'm not going to be here to answer the questions. And with attention, I just have two things to say. One that I did not consider in the presentation, the topic about sustainability of our colleagues and what happens in Argentina. We had a sanction of a law that precisely says that we should modify the historic repair and the pay of sustainability, precisely to keep this going or sustainable. That's the first thing. We're quite happy about it, and we see if the next challenge goes like that, just like what we had in the framework, that the attention, whether it is a contributive system or we are willing as a community to finance the provision systems through other types of contributions or sources, then this will be characterized differently. When I saw the presentation of Ecuador, they've got all the type of contributions. So this will also be quite present, or is present, in the way of thinking or devising the social protection systems. Thank you very much. And I hope to get these questions to be able to answer them later. Thank you. we say goodbye to our colleagues of ANSES, and then we welcome the last participation of this last roundtable of the forum in the hands of Vanessa Stoeren. Correct me if I'm wrong pronunciating Vanessa Stoeren from the Social Insurance. She is a lawyer for the TAM and coordinator for the emergency countries, and she is the head of the Division of Studies and Public Finances of the Mexico City. She was director of evaluation of the Ministry of Public Credit and manager of Ceratu. And as we said, she's the coordinator of strategic research for the Mexican Institute of Social Security. Go ahead, Vanessa. Good afternoon. Hello. Good afternoon. Can you hear me? Yes, we can hear you. We can hear you perfectly well. Go ahead. If I may, please, just a sec. Right. Good afternoon. Thank you for the invitation. And indeed, honor and privilege to be able to share through these forums the experiences that we have had and learn from the experiences of other countries. Let's go to the case of Mexico. First of all and foremost, to say to you that the pension schemes is segmented, not segmented as in the country. We could say that the segmentation takes place in two lines. Through generation, we have part of the population that is insured, has a right to pension, just like before the reform of 1997, and those are the ones that are going to quarterly into the insurance system before this reform was enforced, and another ones that are those that have got no no access to the retirement, but only what they have paid for the pensions. Another segmentation that we've got, which is very important, is the working or labor market, formal and informal, to call it somehow. And in the formal one, we've got other segmentation that might not exist in other countries for the private sector. People are assured through the IMSS, and on the public areas, there are several institutions that insure the workers. The ISTE, which is general for working sector, the insurance for the armed forces, state systems, municipal systems, public universities, and other ones. The rest are at the IMSS. As regards the informal sector, this part of the pension, non-contributive pension system started that nowadays has grown, as we will see onwards. From the beginning, we've got the market of pensions that is very, very segmented, all right? The idea here is to give you a scheme. We've got the population, all those that would have this right to pension, a non-contributive pension, to now it's segmented practically 8.3 million, which are the same as 1,125 pesos per month. Those are the people who reach that age. And as regards the defined benefit, we've got about 2.4 million pensions that are paid. This is for advanced age. And in the intermediate area, that would be like 6,000 pesos, like 273 US dollars. And the defined contribution, there are some that have not gotten to the age yet. And hasn't got to the leads, which is 750 weeks, and we still have people that are trying to get a pension. This chart tries to show how all the pensions are paid by the IMSS. We have an increase of 86%. For 2019 and for 2020, we expect this increase to decrease because of the pandemic. And now that we've got a general panorama of how this pension schemes is run in Mexico, we will present to you what the challenges we have seen that we've got 3 challenges: low coverage, lack of sufficiency, and tax costs or expenses. Additionally to that, as we had seen in the presentations of other colleagues, we have other administrative problems that derive from this system that might need a total redesigning. We've got lots of pension systems, and they derive from different obligations or benefits that we could call them in different ways. That could be called in a vertical axis. There are several guidelines. This is a great challenge that we've got in Mexico, and I see in other countries as well. So let us check on the low coverage. Extra to the fact that we see that there's people who are working out there not insured or assured outside of the system. People within the system will not be covered. I want to ask you that there's a reform that I just presented to Congress, and is pending. It presented certain reforms. But the way it is today, the system, there's a great transition of people that go from being formal and informal in their work. And of course, the coverage is very low. So we think that the people who are within the system of defined contribution, 24%, will not get to the average of 250 systems to have a right to a pension. That means that at the end, they will have to return their savings. They will not get a pension. That means 76% are there.
And this is, of course, due to the low density of contributions of around 44.3% in average. So out of the total amount of people that people might be contributing to the system, they only do it 44.3% of the time. And this is due to the fact that they go in and out from formal markets. That is, say, we wouldn't have a group of people that's only within formal market a group of people only in informal market. Actually, in Afore, we have around 60-70% of accounts registered, but only 20 millions are active currently. So this talks about these transitions between the 2 markets, formal and informal. There's other studies that suggest or that validate this information in such a way that we had 61% of people who are working and contributing do so only half the time that they could, given the type of work that they have. And well, this pretty much constricts our system and leaves a lot of people outside. Now, as it pertains to sufficiency and the amounts of pension, out of those 24% of people who we said would reach the threshold of contribution weeks, only 7% would, only 17% would have access to the warranted pension. So the rest would need to be financed by this pension warranted by federal government. Now, in terms of replacement rate, like you can see here in this chart, is high for for low wages and a little bit low for high wages. So we have a problem with low sufficiency when it comes to sustainability and fiscal costs. We have estimated, but this portion of defined benefit, which in principle cannot be moved a lot, but rather this new system that started. So present value 2010 will be 2100, so over 10% of GDP. And like you can see here in the chart in the beginning of the social contribution, all that's part of the federal government contributes with people. I'm sorry, we lost sound. Apparently connection was lost. Vanessa, can you hear us? No, I think that we lost connection with Vanessa. So please allow us just 1 minute to solve this technical difficulty. Yeah, apparently she doesn't have an active connection right now. Okay. So in the meantime, while we get the connection back, we might hold on. She probably has as a connection. Yeah, I think it's reestablished. Vanessa, please excuse me. So where were we? Well, in this slide, you were precisely talking about fiscal costs. Yeah, that one. Can you see me now? No, we cannot see you, but we can hear you, and we can see your presentation. So I think that we can continue with that. Okay, so again, going back to fiscal costs, estimated around 10% of the GDP to 2100. And well, the strongest portion of it would be the social quota. That's federal government pitching in for the lowest salaries and then guaranteed pension derived from the low amount of savings. Now, in terms of coverage, what we've done, what I told you about this reform initiative presented before Congress on Friday, this is rather new. Well, we've been discussing it since August, but we just presented it to Congress. So one of the items this proposal reform is reducing the threshold from 1,200 weeks that's necessary to have a pension to 1,000. We'll kick this off with 750 weeks, and we will increase these on a yearly basis. That's just to close the initial gap for a lot of people to have the right, to a pension guaranteed by the federal government. And at least in Mexico, Social Security, we've been looking for this for a couple of years. We're trying to make a little bit more flexible the coverage schemes, trying to link them from a formal worker-employer relationship with a certain degree of success. But well, we need to make more work to these ends, and well, that's on the institute's side. And well, given the fact that there's a lot of horizontal heterogeneity, the one we were talking about, because so many institutions ensure people, workers, there are a lot of portability schemes, portability agreements, and well, that allows for the balance not to be lost when it comes to contributed weeks. And in particular, we've been working a lot with the Ministry of Well-being to contribute with broadening the coverage of the pension or non-contributive pension, thus allowing for agilization and payment of this pension. And like I mentioned before, it will probably be necessary to intensify certain interventions, especially to achieve universal coverage and increasing the density of contributions, because that concerns us. And in terms of sufficiency, this reform initiative is a node point for it. Is looking to increase contributions for these insurance for retirement and old age up to 15%. So, weighted average of 8.8%. So this looks for savings to be higher for workers, and that will allow increasing their pension. This reform initiative, through it, we're proposing a maximum fee charged by Afores, by pension fund managers, and we're also looking for interventions. So at the end of work life, this lifelong pensions is one of mechanisms through which people will be able to get their pensions for there to be a good offer in the market, as well as good decision-making process by people insured by it, again achieving a better pension. However, if the contribution density don't increase, well, the amount of a pension or savings achieved won't go up as well. Now, in terms of fiscal sustainability, we had a reform back in 1995, and that, in one way or the other, kind of stopped the the growth of this defined contribution scheme prices. And in this new reform initiative, up for approval in Congress, we're looking for a change in distribution of state contributions, looking for more equality. And also the fact that contributions increase for all insured workers will mean that to those around 6 million people out of those 20 insured by Mexican Social Security, we can choose this defined compensation scheme. Will receive a benefit from federal government, irrespective of the savings that they've generated in their accounts. And what happens at the end of their work life, aside from access to pension, is that these people will receive, of course, their pension, but the balance that they have accrued will be trespassed or move on to the federal government. So that would help with the contributions. So to them, this would mean more savings, and at the same time, that will allow to finance warranted pensions at least. And again, well, this fiscal costs remain due to this transition generation and other systems under the law of Social Security. So I think that we still have work to do in in this sense to come up with a continued reform scheme like we did in 1997. So in general, in a nutshell, that's the scenario in Mexico. We had the same set of problems as do other countries. We're trying to solve them, but the challenges are still big, especially in terms of coverage. And like my peers before me said, everything pertaining to informality. And just in closing, a little bit off topic, but I still wanted to include this portion presentation in response to COVID. We were hit by it as everybody else. So in the Mexican Social Security, we made big efforts to ensure our pension holders. We help them not having to collect their pension banks. So no, I mean to different offices to collect their checks. So we had this online modality. We put together a lot of efforts, basically technology based, to be able to protect them from from uh, from a pandemic. And again, this was everything in a nutshell. And well, thank you very much for your attention to my presentation. So if you have any questions, please let me know. Thank you very much, Vanessa. Stuart, coordinator of strategic research from Mexican Social Security Institute. We will have a quick Q&A because we have a bunch of them. And to remember that we have, give or take, 20 minutes for this Q&A. And well, they're divided as follow: 2 from our peer from Argentina, 2 for Costa Rica, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, a bit more generic, and the rest for our peer from Mexico. So if it's all right with you, I will read the more generic questions and then we'll go to the more focused questions. So for our peer in Costa Rica, so what's the projection time for the implementation of the multi-pillar system in Costa Rica? And the second is about the official educational program in Costa Rica. Does it include activities related to professional education and health education? And what results have you rendered from it? From our peer from Mexico, our colleague from Mexico, what do you think about eliminating modality 40? Now, when it comes to benefits for unemployment, is there some sort of discount for contributed weeks, or rather, why they take away some contributed weeks if these resources are for the workers? And we have the same question. Next, outsourcing has generated chaos because they're not paying these items of individual accounts. Apparently, there's no oversight, no one demanding contributions. How to make this contributions being mandatory? And next, account statements or statements from workers under Afore do not reflect substantial profits. And the workers don't really know how to look at this statement as though they were not owners of their accounts. And another, if the reform proposal is not generating anything good for the workers, why going on with this type of scheme? And last, how much taxes would workers work in terms of compensations under this new reform that's up in for approval in Congress? I don't know who would like to begin. So let's start with Jaime Barrantes from Caja Costarricense de Seguros. So about the questions regarding the Costa Rican multi-pillar secure system, this was passed by the Congress. So IVM, which is three-party financing and public management, is maintained as a basic pillar for most of workers. This is tied with another pillar, teachers having a system apart from the others. So that would be the first and basic pillar of pensions in Costa Rica. This is a mandatory and individual account system that would add a complementary pension to what the first pillar gives. Now, maturing of the system, that is safe for savings for workers, and there could have a significant impact on the amount of pensions. I mean, we foresee that it could mature around year 2035. So we've been working under the system for 20 years, and in the end, we foresee that the replacement rate in Costa Rica will be made up of pretty much 50% from the first pillar and around 15% additional from the second pillar. So what we foresee is, well, getting at least 65% of average replacement. Nowadays, this replacement is pretty much covered by IVM. with a given contribution rate that will be projected due to the increases that we have calculated all the way up to 12.6% in 2029. So that's what we foresee in terms of the contributions. Of course, we need to strengthen this pillar of this third pillar, which is voluntary contributions. But at this point in time, I mean, the amount is negligible. The amount of worker participation under this scheme, and where we believe that we need to strengthen has to do with non-contributive regime. That apparently would allow to strengthen the system when turning it into a universal system, something that allows us to tackle the coverage problems and that we've seen cannot be solved by the contribution systems in light of changes in the work market and the economic situation of many contributors. And like our peers from Argentina and Ecuador explained, this is of course up for debate. In this multi-pillar system, diversification of financing sources that is not only thinking about social contributions, but how to complement this with income coming from automation of work, incomes derived from some specific taxes, together with the government participation and the usage of investment to strengthen things like public works, construction of infrastructure, bridges, highways, and a part of that could be destined to social security. So these are things that we need to strengthen. And at this point in time, we're in the consolidation phase of this multi-pillar system that was created back in the year 2000. And right now we're waiting on approval of the second pillar and strengthening of this non-contribution scheme. And like I said, complementing the financial sources of the system with non-traditional sources of income that could come from social contributions. And they will still a very important component for years to come, but they need to be complemented with other sources of financing. I think that's very important in the framework of the second question. And well, we have reached out to the Ministry of Public Security in Costa Rica to be able to incorporate and tie in public school programs everything pertaining to social security and pensions. So you saw in the slides, we were able to put together some summer workshops in our educational centers. We actually have the Social Security Week in Costa Rica, so we need to make the most out of these spaces so our personnel from Social Security can go, obviously, accompanied by professional education and how to reach at a very early age. In the slide, you saw that we're doing this in primary school, children school age, and middle school age. That soft skills is very important. Also, in that sense, the use of technology, we gave one very important first step. So we have this database where people can see some sort of medical history, their medical history, and they can download their own digital file. And that app will also incorporate information about pension. Nowadays, every single citizen from Costa Rica with a smartphone who can download the application called EDUS, they can have access to their health information and the contributions that they've had towards retirement, the history of employers, and some sort of prospection foresight regarding their retirement. I think that the use of digital tools like this will keep being important, especially right now under the pandemic. We have strengthened everything that has to do with social contributions through these technological tools, trying to teach elderly people tools like using Facebook, WhatsApp, so they can remain informed of all our activity stocks and workshops that allow them to strengthen all these efforts. And I think that this will cooperate to consolidate this multi-pillar system for pensions in Costa Rica. Perfect. Thank you very much. Everything that you said was very clear cut. We have 10 minutes for next Q&As now. I will pass the floor to Vanessa Stewart from Mexico. Yeah, thank you. I have a bunch of questions. Okay, so eliminating mode 40. Mode 40 is something that has been going on for quite a while, and it allows people going out from formal work market to keep contributing towards their pensions. So from that point of view, I wouldn't agree to eliminate this modality because of what I've said. You're taking away people to continue contributing towards their pensions. Working from the informal sector. That's my personal opinion. I know there's an initiative trying to take this away, so that's my opinion. And why discounting weeks? Well, nowadays the number of contributed weeks is pretty much a requirement towards the pension, but another requirement is having sufficient funds. I think that these are two different parameters. And if you take away resources, of course, the amount that you have saved will decrease. So it will be logical in taking away weeks corresponding to these amounts. And, well, of course, to promote that they keep saving and contributing. And what else? They say that there will be any profit from pensions. Of course, there will be profits coming from pensions with the initiative. Actually, the idea is doubling contributions. So if everything remains constant, which is what some people are a little bit hesitant about, well, the pensions will be doubled. What else? I really can't remember the other questions. Could you repeat the questions? Yes, hold on. Well, you provide an answer to modality 40, outsourcing. Oh yeah, forward balances do not reflect substantial profits, and there's no reference in terms of real earnings that this generates. And well, the workers are just stare at these statements with as if they weren't really owners of that account. I think that those are enough questions. You want another one? No, I really don't get that statement that they're not generating savings with the pensions. Obviously, when increasing contributions and if everything remains constant, they will save more. Okay, the next, what will be the fiscal cost that contributors HF, well, not being able to yet pension under the reform that is now in Congress. And what's the different contribution regimes in Mexico? That's very generic. And will you do something with old age item that we have not received? I mean, retirees from the IMSS. I think you're talking about JBP. Okay, so yeah, that's an internal IMSS subject. I don't know how to to really reply that question. And in the reform initiative, there's a transitory paragraph saying that these procedures will be revised, but not necessarily this retirement scheme. Again, that's something internal from Mexican Social Security, and I will not. I will not go into that. As per the statements, well, you need to see how much you're contributing and for how long. There's some studies, you can see this in the reform initiative. There's studies that say that most of the balances, or what you see in the balances, are earnings from individual accounts. I think that's, well, you need to go over these account statements in case you don't understand them. But I think the CONSAR, which is the National Commissions for Pension Fund Management, they've done a great effort when it comes to communication. But this is something that could be revised. Probably, the statements are not understandable to some, but yes, profits are there, of course, because of the system. But I mean, people don't contribute enough. We were able to see that they quote half the time or under half the time. So you cannot save if you're not constantly contributing. I mean, the amount saved cannot grow if, well, you don't contribute to it, pretty much. And I think that's it. Well, at any rate, there are some more generic questions, but we're a little bit short on time. And well, of course, thinking of you, you had an agenda where we detailed a given time for your participation. So it's still important that you know that for us in conference is extremely important to know any questions pertaining to this dialogue that we're trying to establish. That will allow us to put together new conferences, new fora. And well, of course, this is a hot topic right now, and you might have a lot of questions from things which are very abstract to many very technical questions. So I would like to thank all our panel members for their presentations in this fourth and last round table, and now I'll pass the floor to our Secretary General, Interim Secretary General, Mr. Arca Hernandez, to formally close this event. Thank you very much, and good afternoon again. So on behalf of the 84 member countries in the Inter-American Conference of Social Security and its President, Mr. Robledo Aburto, I would like to thank you for the interest in joining us for these 2 days' work of the Regional Forum of Pensions 2020. At the same time, I would like to voice out my gratitude to each of our panel members, the 4 roundtables that we had, especially our peers from CEPAL, Mexico, OIS, ISS, UNAM, our members, Caja Costarricense de Seguridad Social, el Instituto Ecuatoriano de Seguridad Social, Administración Nacional de Seguridad Social from Argentina, and Instituto Mexicano del Seguro Social, Mexican Social Security, as well, from technical equipment, technical teams from CISS and other institutions partaking in this forum, making it possible. So before this environment, this economic, social, health crisis that we recently faced, it's been self-evident huge limitations of social security schemes in many regions, and the Americas is not an exception. We have shortcomings when it comes to coverage, social security, health services, and social security not only in the region, but in general, the health systems for the whole continent. And just a small parenthesis. I mean, this might not be the topic of this forum, but we need to remember that we have huge gaps when it comes to infrastructure and infrastructure in health services. And this will, of course, impact negatively work life and contributions of workers. We may have forgotten this focus on preventive care and in healthcare. in particular the case of Mexico and other countries in the region, has derived in other epidemics that we need to learn how to control. This being obesity, overweight, in the case of Mexico, affects 2/3 of the population. In the case of diabetes, Mexico is amongst first place in prevalence of this type of disease. So these things we shouldn't neglect. Now the effects of globalization and demographic changes. We can add right now health and economic emergency without we've never seen before. So due to all this, well, this conference seeking to bring space to exchange dialogue and experiences. So all countries, all states need to advance in complying their their obligations, providing a dignifying end of life to our pension holders, having pensions that allow people to maintain a fair and dignifying way of life at all age, and a minimum decent way of life. So the ideal would be to have 100% coverage for all people. And in terms of benefits, this should allow people not facing poverty in the last stage of their lives or throughout any temporary contingencies that might happen in the continent without public finances being compromised by it. And international organizations, we need to have or put together efforts to go beyond the theory and to establish viable legal frameworks for the population, highlighting three priorities: coverage, benefits, and financial sustainability. And international organizations should also focus our energy and our work to understand the regions as just one big country with clear goals to overcome any shortcomings when it comes to social security and medical services. We need to learn to think of us in America as just one group of people for us to be able to contribute to the solidarity amongst the countries. Again, we should overcome these problems in every single country. Again, to be more solidary as the big continent of brotherly countries that we've been throughout the time. So, without further ado, I would just want to thank you for attending this virtual forum. Thank you very much, and have a good afternoon.